This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Caregiving isn't always happy. I mean, caregiving sometimes is very sad. It's exhausting. It's life-changing.
Caring for aging parents or other loved ones while working, raising children, and trying to live your own life? Wondering how to find the time for your personal health and happiness? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, the show where real family caregivers share how to be happy and healthy while caring for others. Now, here's your host, family caregiver, and certified caregiving consultant, Elizabeth Miller.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, which is part of the Whole Care Network. If this is your first time listening, welcome. So glad you are here. This is a show produced bi-weekly to help family caregivers integrate self-care and caregiving into their lives. Each of our episodes has an accompanying show notes page where we've got the transcript, the video, the audio, and all of the links to the products and the resources that we're talking about. Head over to the website, happyhealthycaregiver.com, and underneath the podcast menu, you can either click the image or the episode number for today's show to get all of that. The link will also be in whatever podcast platform you are listening to, their episode description. It's not too late to join us for this self-care at sea cruise later this year. Come and enjoy the respite and leave with a lifeline of resources and community. You've got plenty of notice to get things arranged for your care recipient. And instead of just thinking there's no way, what if you just asked? Ask the folks around you to see if they're willing to support you, to have this time where you can connect with other caregivers and just enjoy yourself. It's a Norwegian cruise on the new ship Aqua. We're going to some fabulous destinations. You're going to make lots of great memories on the cruise, and then you're going to go back feeling energized and have like this lifeline of support and community. Learn more at bit.ly/HHC Self-Care Cruise, and I will also link to this into the show notes. By the way, we still have some sponsor opportunities available where we want to offer excursions and things to our folks that are coming on the cruise at reduced prices and do some fun, different welcome events. So if this is up your alley as a business, please reach out and I'm happy to share details. I'd like to thank our episode sponsor, Rare Patient Voice. Do you want to earn cash in exchange for your opinion? Rare Patient Voice, or RPV, helps connect researchers with patients and family caregivers for over 700 diseases and conditions. For patients and caregivers, RPV provides the opportunity to voice their opinions to improve medical products and services while earning cash rewards. Rare Patient Voice, helping patients and caregivers share their voices. If you're interested in this, just join the RPV panel at rarepatientvoice.com/Happy Healthy Caregiver. I read a book recently that I'm giving 4 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads, and it's called Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty. It's basically a drama about family dynamics and the choices we make and the secrets that fester. I enjoyed the complex characters and just the overall mystery of the book. This family owns a tennis clinic, but you don't have to be a tennis fan or even an athlete, frankly, to enjoy the story. After I finished reading the book, I followed it up by watching the TV miniseries, which was based on the book that starred Annette Bening and Sam Neill. So I will link to the book and I'll link to the show to check it out. Apples Never Fall. I'm kind of thinking there's really levels of favorite things, frankly. There are favorite things that just bring us pure joy, and then there are the favorite things that make a difficult thing just a bit easier. And I'm putting this spotlighted product in the latter category. But first, I need to share a backstory that I don't think I've shared yet on the show yet. At the end of last July, while I was on vacation in Michigan, I went to the emergency room and they found what they called an unprovoked blood clot behind my knee. First, I thought it was just a muscle strain, but what should have clued me in after several days is that my calf was in when I wasn't even moving or putting pressure on it. I returned home to Atlanta and went through a plethora of tests, including a CT scan to rule out cancer. And needless to say, my medical anxiety was off the charts. As things were being investigated and different results and bills were coming into my MyChart, thankfully there was no cancer, but I did test positive for a genetic condition called factor V Leiden. And this genetic gene came from both sets of my parents, so the hematologist recommended that my kids and my siblings get tested for it so that they know if they're susceptible to blood clots. I have 2 cousins on my maternal side with factor V Leiden as well. Basically, factor V Leiden is a blood clotting disorder that raises your risk of abnormal blood clots. It's the most common blood clotting disorder that's inherited or passed down within your biological families. People with factor V Leiden have a mutation in their coagulation factor 5 gene, essentially. Your F5 gene controls the production of a protein called factor V, which helps your blood clot when you need it, like after an injury. The factor V Leiden mutation changes this protein structure, and this change causes it to resist other proteins that stop excessive clotting. And as a result, your blood may clot more easily than it should, which leads to complications. We know, of course, if these clots can go to your heart or your brain. So now that I know that I have it, I take a blood thinner to prevent me from having future clots. And I'm also super mindful not to sit for long periods of time. And I wear compression socks for flights and long car trips, frankly. And I was a little depressed about wearing compression socks. I had some PTSD, frankly, around it, because what came to mind are the ones that my parents wore and that my brother currently wears. These beige medicinal looking ones, you know the ones I'm talking about. Then I learned about the fun world of compression socks, like the ones that I ordered from Crazy Compression. Had a lot of fun kind of picking out which ones really mirrored my personality. And so I got these cute patterned socks in the mail. I recorded a little short video about the ones I ordered that I'll share in the show notes. Then I reached out to the company to let them know what I do to help support families and family caregivers. And I was able to get a discount code for the Happy Healthy Caregiver community. And I have a whole page of discount codes that you can get to on my website. So I'll link to that in the show notes. But I'll also link in the show notes the code for crazycompression.com, which is HHC20 for 20% off of your order. Let's meet today's caregiver in the spotlight. Susan Bottega is a nurse by practice who became a caregiver when her husband was diagnosed with CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, over 12 years ago. Since then, Susan has adjusted her life to caring for Bob, researching CLL treatment options, and helping other CLL family caregivers through her virtual support group. In this episode of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, Susan and I talk about adjusting retirement plans after a diagnosis, finding those who are ready and willing to support you in this new caregiving season, and living with intention to create a full and vibrant life while caring for someone with a chronic disease. Enjoy the show. Hello, Susan. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Doing well. Excited that you are here.
Oh, so happy to be here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be great. We're going to talk about kind of a different caregiving angle of the type of caregiver that you are that really hasn't been addressed too much on almost 200 episodes of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that. But first, we always start with something. Mindset is everything, I believe. So I created this Happy Healthy Caregiver jar that people can create on their own from a PDF I offer to just kind of put some positivity, some empowerment into their day. So let's see what yours says for this episode. It says, I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. And that is actually a quote from the painter and creative person, Leonardo da Vinci. So he says, I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. And, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say offhand that as a caregiver, there is nothing but doing.
Yeah. You'll
There's
never
that-
be bored.
Oh, nope, that's for sure. You're never bored. And your job just opens up day by day. It gets bigger and bigger as you go along. And the more you learn, the more you can do. And it's, it's like they always say, if you want a job done well, you find somebody who's a very busy person and they get it done well.
My dad used to say that if you want something done, give it to a
Uh-huh.
busy person because,
That's
and I
right.
was just talking to a caregiver yesterday about, their treadmill of life that they were on and, how they were like grocery shopping at like 6:30 in the morning, and people were teasing them for that. I'm like, listen, the caregivers are so creative and they will figure out how to
Absolutely.
put it all together like a jigsaw puzzle. However, it's overwhelming.
Organization becomes your guide. You have to be organized. You don't have to worry about it. It develops as you go along.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a necessity. I think what spoke to me too about this quote, I put this together years ago, this jar, and have added some refills to it since. And what really spoke to me, I think at the time was that, worrying is kind of unproductive in a lot of ways.
Right.
It is something that we can tend to do a lot of as family caregivers, and yet taking some kind of an action, even if it's, prayer or going for a walk or doing some research to release that worry, like taking some kind of an action feels productive.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Agree with you more. Research, I think, is my, every person has to find their own thing. Research is mine.
That's been
But
your
I think that's
superpower.
because, well, I'm a nurse by profession, so that just fell into it naturally.
Makes sense.
Very science oriented, so I just took it on and went with it as far as I could, and I keep going. I don't stop.
Yeah. Well, it's changing all the time.
Oh, absolutely. As we speak, moment by moment, it changes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. From the beginning of our journey until this time, the amount of change that's taken place is astounding, really and truly.
Yeah. And the information is more accessible than it has ever been. And
Absolutely.
so all of that. Well, tell us a little bit, Susan, about your caregiving journey.
Okay. Well, let's see. It started back in 2012. It probably started before that, but that's when the diagnosis came along. My husband was diagnosed at the same time. He had woken up one day and he had a little bit of shortness of breath.
Okay.
And he was sitting at the side of the bed and I felt the back of his neck and he had some dampness back there. And I said, yeah, it's time to get to the emergency room. Let's go, see what this is about. So we went to the emergency room and he was diagnosed with a severe tear of his mitral valve. And he's told that you can't even get up out of bed. Surgery has to be done immediately. And that, we would get through that. And they said, by the way, you also have CLL. And I'd been a nurse for many years and I had no idea what CLL was. I did oncology and I still didn't know what CLL was, but I did have my handy little iPad and I quickly, went down and looked at it. And I said, oh, this isn't good. If we survive this, then, we're still not home free. If we survive the heart surgery, we're still not home free. So,
what is CLL? If I can pause you for a second.
Chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
It's a mouthful.
And chronic lymphocytic leukemia is something that a lot of CLL people don't like to hear. They much prefer hearing the word, an acronym CLL. My husband will always say, I don't have cancer, I have CLL. And I find that with a lot of people in our group, a lot of them just, it's chronic, it's something that you're going to live with, not necessarily something that you're going to die with.
Okay.
And
is that what cancer to them means, is like it's a death sentence?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. CLL to most of them mean, okay, I'm going to live with this thing. It's going to last for a while, but I can do that. And it's an easier, I guess for many people, it's just an easier thing to hear.
So did the CLL cause what was going on with his heart, or were they completely, they were unrelated?
No.
Okay.
Many, many cases of CLL are diagnosed exactly by that. Something else happens and you go to the doctor for the first time and you're healthy up until that point. Many CLL people are healthy for a very long time. And when something else happens, they do blood work, and then all of a sudden they find it out, and there you are, diagnosed.
So with your background, you mentioned in the medical profession and learning about CLL, like what a, shock that was, but you diving into research, I imagine. Like, what was that journey like for you, researching?
Wow. I had to take some of my science books out to
Wow.
And even as we go forward, more and more the science is becoming very, very complicated. At the time, they didn't have these microscopes that they use now. They can find so many more markers that ever existed before. But at the time, just doing what was available, what they actually could find was very complicated, and it took a while to absorb all of it. I would say it was a good maybe 3-4 months of really studying before I got a really good handle on where we were at. And unfortunately, my husband has a very complicated case of CLL. And what you should know is that CLL is a very homogeneous disease.
What does that mean?
It means that in each person, it manifests itself in a totally different way. There are no two people that can look at each other and say, well, if you have this, then I'm going to have that. It doesn't work that way. It really and truly doesn't. It's so dependent on your biology, your own personal biology. Even the luck of the draw, I have to say, it's dependent on. But no two people, follow the same pathway. So this is one of the reasons why getting yourself a really good specialist is a very important thing.
What kind of specialist do you typically see for this?
A hematologist.
Hematologist.
Got it. We want to get a hematologist oncologist that sees a lot of CLL people, because of the nature of the disease. Seeing a couple or 2, 3, 4 cases a month, it doesn't give you a clear idea of where things are going.
Right.
You don't really get a good feeling. The more cases that you see, the more you get an understanding of the disease. And
Makes
that's
sense.
so important when it comes to treating the patient.
Yeah, we certainly want the patient-centered care. Your husband's name is Bob, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So how has CLL manifested for Bob, and like what are some of the things as his caregiver that you have had to help him with?
Well, initially, was getting him over his surgery and acclimating him to the fact that he had this disease, and that was very difficult. Unfortunately, he progressed very quickly, so treatment became absolutely necessary within a year's time of being diagnosed, which is not a common thing in CLL. Many people go many, many years. In fact, many people go without ever needing treatment. They're just monitored closely as time goes by, and often it passes. I won't say it passes, but the time passes, and they never do need treatment. They just live out a normal lifestyle. Sometimes they'll go up and down with their blood work. Their neutrophils or their WBC count will go up or down. The lymphocytes also. But
so a lot of monitoring of his levels.
Monitoring. And that's a very hard thing for a lot of people, because when you hear the word cancer, you want to get that out of you fast. And CLL, that's not the way it works. You go into a period of what they call watch and worry, watch and wait. Everybody has a different name for it, but that is exactly what it is. It's monitoring. And that is so very important, because you may feel well, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your blood is feeling well.
Gotcha. Okay.
So getting that blood work, whether it be every 6 months, every 3 months, whatever your doctor prescribes, is so very important.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been with him through all of that. And is the treatment like that you had mentioned, is it like typical chemotherapy, radiology, or are there other things that people are?
That was the thing that was very special with us. We unfortunately were right on the brink of the new novel agents coming out at the time.
What is that?
The novel agents are the first one was a BTK inhibitor, which was ibrutinib. So we tried to wait as long as we could, because it had become known that FCR That's heavy duty chemo. FCR was what the gold standard at the time that
Okay.
Bob was diagnosed. But it is very heavy duty chemo, and like all heavy duty chemos, it kills good cells and it kills bad cells. And then you hope that your good cells replenish themselves enough so that your bad cells will die off. But that wasn't the case with Bob.
Mm.
Later on, we found out that he had markers that in today's world would indicate that wasn't a good treatment for him, but we didn't have a choice. That was the only treatment that was available. So he did get his FCR, and he did okay for just about a year. After
Okay.
going through all that, it lasted about a year. And then he developed autoimmune hemolytic anemia, along with pure red cell aplasia, which is what that means is the autoimmune hemolytic anemia produces blood cells that just aren't good enough to sustain you. It is basically an anemia.
Mm.
And the pure red cell aplasia means that it kills off new blood cells that are being made. So it was like a double whammy. It came at him from both ends. So he became transfusion dependent for a couple of months before his doctor was able to clear that up. And then he went on ibrutinib, and that lasted for
What is that?
Ibrutinib is a BTK inhibitor. It's the first of the novel agents that came out.
So when you say novel, is it still like an intravenous medicine, or is
No,
this
no,
a
no.
medication?
It's oral. It's
Oral medication. Okay.
So, a pill a day.
A pill a day.
Well, pill a day therapy. By that time, they found out that these novel agents, if you will, again, oral medications, were working for much better than FCR, and were doing less harm than FCR did.
Yeah,
So,
and less invasive in your life. Like you don't have to sit for.
for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Sitting in those infusion rooms for hours and hours and hours was awful, absolutely awful. But the pill a day did away with that. That lasted for about 2 or 3 years. And then he's had so many multiple things. He's had a transformation. He had Richter's transformation. He got through that. Most recently, he's developed MDS, which is myelodysplastic syndrome. Yeah, myelodysplastic syndrome.
What is that?
That's another form of cancer to go along with the wonderful CLL. And looking back, we found out that it was the very original treatment of FCR that was the causation of this.
Oh boy. So something new thinking is going to help is actually making things.
Exactly.
Well, like Susan, thank goodness you have this medical background in this. What are people doing that do not
I ask
have
that question all the time, Elizabeth. What do people that don't have this knowledge? What about the people that have language difficulties? I mean, it's crazy when I think of how difficult it must be for them to navigate this road. It's a very difficult road to navigate.
Yeah. And, I felt I don't have a medical background. I'm, studied journalism and
That's a good one.
IT professionally for years. But I felt like I was getting my master's in caregiving and like learning all of the different things. And it was, in addition to adapting to this new role and this change in your life, and really the caregiver getting a diagnosis as being a caregiver, because when Bob got his diagnosis, you kind of got your diagnosis too, Susan, as hey, he's going to have this chronic thing. And oh, by the way, it's going to progress. And
tell you, the one good thing about that is it comes on gradually, Elizabeth. It doesn't hit you like a bomb. You grow into it, and the more you do, the more you find you can do. And before you know it, you start out and well, I have to do this, and this is one job, and then another job is thrown on, and before you know it, you get pretty good at it.
Yeah, you sound definitely like an organized person, and we're not reluctant to kind of take on the role. It's been kind of in your DNA your whole life of being a nurturer and caring for people. But how was this for you emotionally? And did you go through any type of caregiver burnout?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Well, the fear, there's a tremendous amount of fear that goes along with it. Initially, you're frightened, the patient's life isn't just changing, but your life is changing. And, it's very different depending on the age of the patient as well. Young women whose husbands are diagnosed, or men whose wives are diagnosed, it's a very different thing, because they look at they're raising their kids, and that becomes the most important thing. And then it becomes financial. Are you going to be able to work through this? What am I going to be, a widow somewhere, down in the future, or a widower? These are, really hard questions. But as you get older, and so many of the CLL people are diagnosed now. I think 70 is the average age for the diagnostics to come about. But now we're finding a lot of younger people are coming down, getting it at a much earlier age. So it's a very different role depending on what stage of life you're at. For me, I had a plan for my retirement. I had a plan. We were going to go all over the world. Now we go to Presbyterian. So yeah, life changed a lot. And
were you able to keep working, or like what was your rest of the family situation look like?
No, fortunately, I had retired at that time. I had already retired. I retired very young.
Okay. And Bob was retired?
Bob retired at 55. So
wow.
I said, I'm not leaving you home alone. I'm retiring too.
Well, in some ways, how interesting that you both retired young. And did you have any years to kind of enjoy retirement before the diagnosis?
Yeah, there were a few years. Not too many, but a few.
Okay.
But we still do. We still enjoy our life. I can't honestly say that we don't enjoy our lives. We still do. It's limited in many respects, but it's you grow into it. You just sort of grow into it, and it's okay. It's good.
It's different doesn't necessarily mean bad. What are some of the things that bring you joy, Susan, and you and Bob together joy?
Oh, my grandchildren, for sure. We have 12 grandchildren. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah. So, they bring me joy, on times when they're the happy caregiver is maybe a somewhat of a misnomer, because caregiving isn't always happy. I mean, caregiving sometimes is very sad. It's exhausting. It's life-changing. You deal with the patient's depression a whole lot. Anybody that lives with this kind of a disease for a long time, and especially since COVID hit us, and COVID became such a limiting factor in our lives, it limits what they're able to do. And, it's very difficult, for the patient.
And for you, like that, it's hard to live with a person who's struggling with mental health.
You better believe it. And there's a tremendous amount of depression. And, you have to deal with your own feelings of loss by your life having changed. But then you have to reach out to them and understand what they're going through, because they're not only have lost, but they're the cause of your having lost, which when you love somebody, that's a very heavy burden to carry. For the patient, I'm saying, that you have to have your life changed as well as theirs, so it requires a lot of understanding, a lot of talk, a lot of honesty. And just, you really have to learn how to share things, and share your feelings. And sometimes the patient can't do that too easily. You have to pull it out a little bit. And it's hard. Yeah. So you become a caregiver, you become a therapist, you become a secretary, you become a negotiator when you negotiate bills. I mean, there's just no end to it, really and truly.
You wear a lot of different hats, and you're also their spouse, know. So at some
that
point,
is one of the more important things. It's a very good point you bring up, really and truly.
So how do you maintain that relationship, like the romance, the intimacy?
You got to give it, because for the most part, these people, as they progress in their disease, they're sick. A lot of
Mhm.
times they're sick. So you have to give that, you have to be the one to reach out.
Mm.
And, traditionally it's the man who reaches for the woman, but you have to be the woman who reaches for the man in this case, and I don't mean to say all women are the caregivers. There are many men who are
Of
the
course.
caregivers, but I think it's very important for patients to understand, and you have to teach them. I always say, when you want your children to grow up loving you and returning to you some of the things that you gave to them, it doesn't happen by osmosis. You have to teach them. You
It's
have to teach
intentional.
them. Yes, you have to teach them. This is your responsibility. And as a caregiver, sometimes you have to say to the patient, this is what I need for me to continue. This is
Mhm.
what you need to give me. I need to be appreciated.
They're
You
not mind
know,
readers. And you're
exactly.
not a mind reader.
Well,
Yeah.
they're consumed with their own well-being, as anybody is when they get sick. You become consumed with your own feelings. It's very hard for you to think of somebody else's because you're trying so hard to work on your own.
Yeah. And
So
it's even more important in some ways, or crucial, because
mhm,
this is a chronic thing. This isn't something that's going to, like, oh, it's a knee replacement or you're going to get back on your feet again. Like, we need to figure this out. Like, this needs to be a sustainable life for us.
one of my favorite arguments sometimes, and we fight all the time because as I'm getting older, it's hard for me to do everything that I did 5 years ago. And
Hmm.
I have to say to Bob, you have to pick up some of this stuff.
Hmm.
You've got to pick up after yourself. You don't throw the dishes in the sink. You throw the
Yeah.
dishes in the sink and wash them, and then you dry them and you put them
Yeah.
away.
Keep doing the things you can keep doing and
Exactly,
meet,
exactly.
meet you
Because
in the middle. I used to say that
Mhm.
even to my mom, like, you're going to meet me
Exactly,
halfway.
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
there's so many things you're doing.
No,
And I know you mentioned, like, one of the care tips is that you've learned how important your care team is that
oh
surrounds
yeah,
you and surrounds Bob, frankly.
yes,
Like, but
yes.
what is, how do you start these good relationships where people continue to show up, particularly in a chronic situation where it's not a short-term thing. Like, you need help for forever, frankly.
You don't, you don't, you don't. You
You don't
find
want.
you don't get people to show up because people,
Mm.
unfortunately, when you can no longer participate in the things that your social group participates in, you're living a different life, a
You
totally
fall off the
different life.
text threads and the
Yeah,
email chain.
exactly,
So for your friends
exactly,
and family, it's like, oh, or
exactly.
they make assumptions maybe that you can't do some things that you
Or
used.
or sometimes get annoyed that you don't, or
Yeah.
sometimes get annoyed that you don't. And the thing with CLL is sometimes you don't look sick, sometimes
Mm.
you look perfectly healthy. And then they say, well, why can't you? What's wrong with you? And then you have to understand, I can't go on cruises. I can't go on cruises because if Bob gets sick on a cruise, what am I going to do? Because
Y-
sometimes if you get an infection and you're on a ship, unless you have access to good health care and somebody that's going to give you antibiotics,
Mm.
what are you going to do? So, I limit things like that. I do things. If we travel, I don't want to be on a plane more than 3 hours because I justify in my head in 3 hours I can get back to Manhattan and I can get back to our doctor. He can make that trip. He can handle
Right.
that trip. I won't never let it get to the point where he can't and be someplace else.
So you
These
have
are
some boundaries about the things that you're
exactly,
willing to.
exactly.
So and what another, like, a grief or a loss to have the people that you have known as your close circle of people to kind of you know vacate your life in some ways. Like, how have you coped with that?
Now, first of all, you don't have a whole lot of time. So that's number one. Your time is taken up with running back and forth to doctors, with all kinds of things. With me now, I'm managing home care because Bob gets shots and infusions and he gets oh my God, he gets all kinds of things.
Yeah,
So,
it's like
you
a
know,
job. You have a job,
oh, it's a
big
full-time
job.
job.
Yeah,
Sometimes I wake up in the morning with a list of telephone calls that I have to make, and nobody does what they're supposed to when they're supposed to do it. You've got to be on
nobody.
top
Yeah.
of it all the time. So what you do is you make different friends, you make new friends. And that's one of the things that I've done with the CLL Society. I facilitate a group with them. And I now have, oh, well, we have over 50 members, maybe closer to 60 members.
Wow.
They don't all come to the meetings, but they
Are they
call.
in person or virtual meetings?
We started in person and it was wonderful, but then COVID came along and that kind of put a
Yeah.
glitch into it, because obviously CLL people are, more apt to have a bad case of COVID, and
And a high risk for immunity things in general. So
ab-
in that case, can CLL Society, could anybody in the US join your?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Anytime. When we were doing it locally, it remained a local group because you came to local meetings. But now that it's on the internet, I have a member from France that wants to
Wow.
join.
So international.
I have one from Germany. I have one from Colorado. I have them all over the place now.
So, I mean, we did something similar. I'm a leader for a group called daughterhood.org that does virtual support groups. And, we made the same change during COVID. We went virtual, and it's a mixed blessing. I miss the in-person interaction with my small group, but we are like scaling and reaching way more people. And so that feels very empowering, I think, and also just to connect people that need community,
It's
rural
exciting.
areas. It is exciting. Yes,
Exciting.
yes.
Yeah.
Are there some of the things like that come up over and over again that you like, some of, if they say, oh, Susan always says, for your groups, like, are there just little nuggets that you're passing along to the members?
Oh, it's whatever they need at the time. I mean, I take each case as it comes along. As I said, half of more than 3/4 of the people, if they don't come to the meetings, they all have my phone number, they all have my email address. So I made a whole more friends than I can handle.
Yeah.
Friends all over the place now.
It's one of the best thing about caregiving, I think, is all the really cool people that we get to meet.
Always the best and the best.
Yeah.
Really, truly. It's these people are just a wonderful group of people, and they're so appreciative of every little thing you can do. And it's a venue where, once you have an illness, I think diabetics probably share this. Nobody wants to talk about your illness. Nobody wants to hear about your doctor visits. This is a very critical part of your life.
Right.
When you're out socializing, you're listening to other people because nobody wants to listen to you. They think it's a downer, or they're afraid that maybe it's contagious, whatever it is that they think. But with the group, we all feel
it's a safe
great.
place.
It's a safe place. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you say to a member who is like, that you feel is like headed down the road to caregiver burnout? Like, what do you say to them?
Take care of yourself.
What does that look like? Yeah.
Get out and do something for yourself. Go see a show, find a friend, join a group, connect with one of the people in our group, give somebody a call and say, hey, I want to have a cup of coffee. Can we just meet someplace? You've got to reach out. That's the key. You can't sit there, with your depression and your loneliness. You've got to be the person
it festers. If you just ignore it, it gets worse and worse. So what do you do for, you're in this for the long haul, Susan? Like, what do you do? Sure. What do you do just for you?
Just for me?
Yeah.
Well, I spend a lot. I'm very fortunate that I have a very close family, and my joy is my family, really and truly, my grandchildren. We went to a fair the other day. My daughter lives, she lives in Manhattan, and she'll come out. She comes out every weekend, and we plan an outing, on that. And we go and we do something, and it's fun. We go maybe to a wine bar. We do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. Then a lot of times I meet for the people in the group. We'll meet for coffee or something like that. If somebody has a problem, they'll call me up and they'll ask what should be done. I do a lot of internet stuff. I'm always talking to somebody on the internet.
Yeah.
My life is very full. It really and truly is. And I keep it that way. And sometimes Bob says to me, where are you going? What are you doing? I'm not going crazy. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of my favorite phrases with my husband is like, it's on the calendar. Like I put it on the calendar.
That's a good, I'm going to get one of those. I
yeah, yeah. It's on
I'm going to remember that.
yeah. And I feel like you come back to Bob and you've got something interesting to share. And it's like,
Exactly.
gives you other things to talk about. Was there a time where you felt guilty for doing these things?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There was a time there was a time when if we were going out to, to a lunch, when Bob doesn't do restaurants, he tries to, we try to avoid restaurants. But,
For the germs, or just doesn't like him in general?
yeah, no, it's the exposure. It's the
Okay.
exposure. He's got, his immunoglobulins are down in the cellar. They're really bad.
Okay.
So he has to be somewhat careful. There was a time when everything would be, I'm going shopping. I used to tell him, I'm going to Target, Bob.
Yeah, retail therapy.
I'll be back. I'll be back in an hour or two. I did that for a while, but then I said, this is silly. Why am I doing that? And I tell him, honestly, what I do is I bring something home for him. If I go out to lunch with my daughter, I bring a meal home with him. So he's very excited to get the meal. He's very happy. As long as you feed Bob, that's all he asks for.
Food is definitely a love language for
Yep.
sure. I know it was a big part of my parents when they were sick is, making that part of their life very interesting for them. Even just going to the grocery store and buying different products and bringing them home and even at a distance, like I used to send my mom one of those like memberships where it would be like healthy snacks, and
that kind of thing is the best thing that you could do.
Yeah,
that kind of thing is the very best thing that can do, because you're getting something, be it once a month or whenever it is. It's a great thing to do, really.
Yeah. The membership things were a great gift idea, I think, in general. I love that I love that you figured out how to do this with intention. You said that you have a very full life, but it didn't happen just by you waiting for things to happen to you.
No, absolutely not. You have to be the one to reach out. And sometimes, sometimes it's what you can do for others. Sometimes it isn't just, that you have that little bit of time, offer it up to somebody, and you'll be surprised. Once that happens, you get it back tenfold. I can tell you that what I get back from my group is so much more than what I give, really and truly. I mean, I anytime I'm down in the dumps, I have a million, phone calls that I can make to people, and it's wonderful. It really is.
Right.
And that comes from giving. You've got to give to get, and that's what life is about.
So true. Well said. Well said. Well, are you ready, Susan, for the lightning round?
Sure.
Okay. So this is a journal that I wrote because journaling really helped me process a caregiving life. And I wanted other people to kind of try this on to see if it helped them feel more energized or gave them peace of mind and so forth. So I made some bookmarks here. No wrong answers. Let's see here. Well, you kind of covered that. What are some ideas you have to slow down and enjoy life more?
Let's see. Computer, I guess. I sit with my computer. I shop.
Yeah. Online shopping.
Yeah. I do a lot of online shopping. Sometimes I just read on the computer. Sometimes I read my books on the computer. I think the computer, I'm not a big television person. I leave the television on for company, not for interest. But, the computer keeps me, that's what I do to relax and just sit down.
Nice. What's a life lesson that you believe needs to be taught in school?
Oh dear, so many. So many aren't taught. I mean, what life lesson is taught in school these days?
I know.
I think just what's missing most in schools these days is kids who just can't just go out and have their friends. Everything is so structured in their lives with sports and everything is structured. These kids don't have a chance to just go out with their friends and just be, do whatever they want to.
Yeah.
Play in the street, you don't need to have pay a fortune for sports. You can go out with a stick bat and hit a ball. This is what we did as a kid. We hung out at the square. We all met at night and the evening at the square, and we sat and we talked. But today, everything is your telephone, your iPhone, your iPad, or whatever.
It's interesting. Like, I think there is some like peace and all of that, and having more white space in your life, and maybe I'm kind of putting words in, but to say, kids are really scheduled and they don't have a lot of white space in their life, which then maybe diminishes their creativity. And I think sometimes it's okay to be bored and kind of figure out.
I think this balance is a very important thing. I think you need, I think there are pluses in the activities that are scheduled. There are pluses, but you also have to allow for downtime. You got to allow kids for downtime. And they'll grow up appreciating that. They'll learn to make their way, they'll learn to entertain themselves. They don't have to be entertained all the time.
Right. Yeah. I crave the white space now as an adult. I don't know about you, but just to have a little slower morning or things like that.
It's okay. It's okay to sit with a blanket and just do nothing, and maybe just watch outside, go outside and watch the sun or watch the leaves fall or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. What's a favorite daily ritual for you? Like, is there something you just kind of look forward to every day that's part of your routine?
Every day is different. Yeah. I really don't have any real ritual. I think every day is different. It's all what's on my calendar that determines what I'm going to do. Checking my calendar, that's my ritual.
That's your ritual. Where am I supposed to be? When am I supposed to be there?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you schedule time for yourself too. Like that's sometimes it's like, okay, that's the day that I get to.
Even if it's just a matter of doing my hair or getting my hair done or whatever, playing with my nails or whatever it is that I do, those are the things that I schedule for myself. And time with my grandchildren I schedule with myself too. That's important.
Yeah, they're going to treasure that for forever. Is there anything else, Susan, that you wish that we talk about, any parting words of wisdom for family caregivers?
I think the most important thing for caregivers is patience. Patience with yourself, patience with your loved one, and just understand that, I'm a religion person. I'm a believer, and I believe every good thing I do in life, somewhere in the hereafter, there's a place for me.
Yeah. You've got a good spot.
And I'm going to make sure I've prepaid my rent.
Yeah, you're making deposits. Yeah. It's an attitude. It's a mindset that you've adopted that informs how you live your day. And so I really respect that you have that. And I got some. How do people stay in touch with you? I've got the cllsociety.org. And the CLL Society, we can link on LinkedIn and on Facebook. We'll put the links to all that in the show notes.
Yep.
Amazing.
They can reach me through that at any time.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being vulnerable with me and sharing your story and sharing how you're living a life with intention. I find that is hopefully going to really give a lot of hope to other caregivers who just maybe are dealing with a new diagnosis with CLL or something else that they're grappling with, and kind of put them on a course to say, okay, this is okay. I'm gonna figure this out.
I'll leave you with this parting thought to all of those who are afflicted with CLL or any other chronic disease. Remember to hug your caregiver. Remember to tell your caregiver how much you appreciate them and how much you love them, because you'll get so much more back.
Nice. Well said. Thank you so much, Susan, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You've been wonderful.
If you're a fan of this Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, then you're going to love Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast, which is also part of the Whole Care Network family. Join sisters JJ and Natalie, who offer a candid, unfiltered space to confess the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a caregiver. From heartfelt confessions to insightful guest interviews, they've got it covered. You'll laugh, cry, and everything in between. Tune into the Confessions of a Reluctant podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or visit confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com. Thanks for joining us today on the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast on the Whole Care Network. As always, show notes that accompany today's episode can be found on my website, happyhealthycaregiver.com. Just look under the podcast menu for today's episode image, and that will take you to the page with the links and information we spoke about today. You'll also find other resources on the website, along with links to purchase the Just For You Daily Self-Care Journal. When you purchase from my website, you'll get a signed copy and for a limited time, free shipping. If you've enjoyed what you heard today, consider subscribing to the show on your podcast platform. It really helps other family caregivers find the podcast, and you'll automatically receive our bi-weekly shows in your podcast listening queue. Maybe while you're subscribing, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review, or just simply talk it up on your social channels. Let's stay connected. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Happy Healthy Caregiver. And until we meet again, please take care of you.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.